Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. For a lot of us, the 1968 classic film Yellow Submarine brings back an absolute flood of childhood memories, right? The vibrant colors, the totally surreal imagery, and of course, the unforgettable music of the Beatles. Usually, we associate this movie with mind-bending visuals, not exactly mind-bending political theory. But today, we're going to look way beyond that nostalgic, psychedelic surface. We're actually unpacking a profoundly deep philosophical narrative about creativity, freedom, and the enduring power of art. Guided by a really fascinating academic analysis from Professor Jonathan Acuna Solano, we'll see how this seemingly lighthearted animated film is, at its core, a powerful allegory for the triumph of human creativity over authoritarianism. Let's quickly run through our roadmap for this explainer. We'll kick things off with Beyond the Surface, then we'll explore Pepperland as a utopia, dissect the Blue Meanie's authoritarianism, look at music as nonviolent resistance, and finally, dive into recovering human creativity. Section 1. Beyond the Surface. To truly get what this film is doing, you've got to think about the exact moment it was made. Produced in 1968, right in the middle of massive cultural upheavals and global challenges to established authority, the film is a carefully constructed allegory. Think of our journey today kind of like an iceberg. We're starting right at the pop culture tip and then plunging deep beneath the surface into some seriously heavy academic frameworks. The film presents this stark, immediate clash. On one side, you've got this vibrant, musical, colorful world representing imagination and freedom. And on the other, creeping in like a shadow, are the dark, highly militarized forces of repression. That's not just a cool stylistic choice. It is literally the core philosophical conflict of the entire story. Section 2. Pepperland as a utopia. So let's look at the vibrant side of that clash. Pepperland. It's an idyllic kingdom, but what's fascinating is that its stability doesn't come from military strength or elaborate legal systems or hoarded wealth. Instead, it's a society organized entirely around color, dance, and collective joy. Now, you might be tempted to just dismiss this as some hippie fever dream, right? But to understand why this matters, we need to anchor it in utopian philosophy. Thinkers like Ernst Bloch and Frederick Jameson actually argued that these imaginative, perfect worlds aren't just naive escapism, they're critical reflections. By projecting a better society, like Pepperland, where harmony is grounded in creativity rather than domination, art is actively exposing the severe deficiencies, the injustices, and the limitations of our own historical reality. And building on that, this matters deeply because art isn't just something meant for a museum. It's the glue of a healthy society. The educational philosopher John Dewey theorized that aesthetic experience is absolutely central to a functioning democratic life. He believed that participating in art actually builds empathy and reflective judgment. In Pepperland, art isn't locked away in these pristine galleries or exclusive concert halls. It is the absolute core of everyday civic life. The kingdom itself is a living educational ideal that encourages curiosity and shared expression. It proves that a society truly flourishes when individuals create together. Section 3. The Blue Meanie's authoritarianism. If Pepperland is our creative utopia, we've got to shift gears to a much more cautionary tone to analyze its ideological exact opposite. The antagonists here, the Blue Meanies, aren't just goofy cartoon villains. They are terrifying manifestations of censorship and fear. Look at their goals. They aren't trying to conquer territory for wealth or resources. Their actions, silencing music, literally draining the color from the landscape, these are acts of pure negation. They just want to erase difference altogether. They're basically hostile to the human spirit itself, representing a world where order is maintained by making everything uniformly lifeless. We can actually break these enemies down using some pretty heavy psychological frameworks. For instance, the psychologist Erich Fromm argued that individuals often seek to escape the burden of freedom by submitting to rigid systems of control. The Blue Meanies embody that collective impulse perfectly. On top of that, the educator Paulo Freire described oppression as a process that hijacks human consciousness, replacing creative inquiry with just passive acceptance. When the Meanies freeze the citizens of Pepperland into statues, that is the ultimate visual metaphor for suspending human agency. Because if you think about it, statues don't speak, they don't move, and they definitely don't question. The critical theorist Herbert Marcuse introduced this concept called repressive desublimation. It's the idea that giving people superficial freedoms actually distracts them from deep societal control. The Blue Meanies represent a really extreme version of this logic, a logic we often find in our own industrial societies, honestly. They view aesthetic experience and artistic imagination as highly dangerous. Why? precisely because art encourages autonomy, self-expression, and nonconformity. To the authoritarian mind, a singing citizen is a threatening citizen. Section 4, Music as Non-Violent Resistance. Which brings us to the big clash, and an incredibly radical narrative choice made by the filmmakers. When the protagonists finally arrive to save the day, they don't bring weapons. There is no physical violence, no superior military force. Instead, they fight back with humor, friendship, and what sociologist Christopher Small calls musicking. Small argued that music isn't just some static object you consume, it's a social activity, it's a verb. And this beautifully bridges the gap between art and action. The protagonists use participatory music, songs like All Together Now, to literally unfreeze those statues, revive the citizens, and restore the very social bonds that the authoritarians tried so hard to destroy. This act of nonviolent disruption builds perfectly into the philosophy of Martha Nussbaum. She argued that cultivating empathy through the arts is absolutely essential for democratic life. By replacing physical aggression with imaginative engagement, society can do something pretty incredible. It can actually soften and transform authoritarianism, rather than just destroying it. Notice that at the end of the film, the blue meanies aren't killed off, they're invited into the music. They're transformed through inclusion. Section 5, Recovering Human Creativity. Ultimately, rescuing Pepperland isn't just about saving some fictional cartoon kingdom. It's a profound allegory for reactivating our own dormant creative capacities, the ones modern society so often suppresses. To grasp why this is so critical, we can look at developmental psychology. Donald Winnicott coined this brilliant term, transitional space. It's a vital psychological zone where play and reality interact. Pepperland is this transitional space. When you pair that with Lev Vygotsky's theories, that higher mental functions emerge through social interaction, it becomes crystal clear. Creativity isn't a solo luxury. It's how we build meaning together. It is a shared cultural necessity for healthy human development. If there is one massive, core takeaway from Professor Solano's analysis, it's this. A society that loses its artistic expression risks becoming static, rigid, and emotionally impoverished. Creativity is not just entertainment, folks. It's a fundamental survival tool for civilizations. It's the very thing that keeps us human, and the shield that protects us from falling into authoritarian uniformity. Which brings us to our final question today. The allegory of Yellow Submarine is arguably just as relevant today as it was back in 1968. In our modern era of constant technological saturation, intense cultural polarization, and really rigid divisions, we have to pause and ask ourselves, are we actively defending our own creativity? Are we still singing together? Or are we letting the modern-day blue meanies slowly freeze our imagination and turn us into silent statues? I'm going to leave you to reflect on that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and whatever you do, remember to keep making music.